recording started.
Okay, great. So, folks, once again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining, and welcome to another session of Azure Power Lunch. As you know, this call is being recorded, and we place our recording on our YouTube channel. And this call is joined by our Microsoft team member as well as members from our customers and partners. So, with that, we are going to move to our topic today, which is um, how you can secure your public web application using some of the web traffic load balancer. And the two services that we're going to talk about are application gateway and front door. I am on purpose not going to talk about, um, our Azure Traffic Manager. We're going to talk about front door and app gateway traffic manager. It's more of a DNS um, kind of a service. So for this discussion, we are just focusing on these two, and we are going to be talking about like what, just like we always do a quick level set on these services, and then look at some of the scenarios and use cases which are applicable to both, or they may be applicable where you can use them better together. Okay. And folks, if you don't mind, can you please mute your phone if you're not speaking? So, application gateway, first of all, it's a layer 7 load balancer. We are specifically talking about V2. Um, it does load balancing at a layer 7, it does SSL offloading. It allows you to do routing based on the URL, so you can host multiple applications behind the scene. It has Azure Firewall baked in as well, web application firewall, so you can turn off and turn on rules and all of those things. And one of the key feature that it provides is that it's able to not only load balance like public endpoint, so you can have app service behind it, or you can have private endpoints behind it. So you can have, let's say, VMs that may be running in a VNet, or you may have other services that have endpoints and things like that. Like one other big example is AKS cluster. It can be used as an ingress controller for an AKS cluster. So you can have all of these things with private endpoints behind it, and it will be able to load balance across that. So that's one of the key capability that it provides. I want to spend a couple of minutes on, sorry, I think I messed up the slides. One second, let's go back here. Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about front door. Azure front door is Microsoft global uh, web workload load balancer. Okay. It does load balancing at across region. It and it provide it's not only a load balancer, it provide the application acceleration. So just to better understand it, I have this example in my mind that let's say if you're going from Dallas to Seattle, you can drive, and it will take you probably 30 hours or 28 hours to get there. Or you can drive to the airport, let's say DFW, and take a plane. So a total of maybe 7 or 8 hours in that time. So that's what application acceleration services do. And same thing front door is doing. So whenever a request comes, let's say somebody is trying to access your web application that you are hosting behind front door. When the request comes to it, let's say somebody opens your application on a mobile phone with a bad network connectivity, this request will go to the closest edge to that customer. And from that, and that's the Azure Edge location, it will hop on to Azure high speed fiber network backbone, and it will route it to the best possible way to the nearest destination where your nearest instance of your application, or nearest mean with the lowest latency. And that's how application acceleration kind of works. And there are other things as well. I mean, it can do SSL termination as well, and other things. And it can break down the handshake as well. And I mean, I think we have covered those things in separate front door discussion. I just want to do a quick level set. And of course, it has built-in web application firewall similar to App Gateway, and it has the DDoS capability baked in as well. You know, and multiple SKUs. So you have the front door classic, which is which can only load balance public um, front end. So let's say you have a web app. If it's hosted, it has to be have a public endpoint. Then you can put that endpoint or endpoints behind Azure front door. So that is a key thing here, public. In the case of Azure Front Door Premium, now you can have private endpoints behind it. So you can have, let's say you have an app service, you can create a private endpoint and put it behind front door. So that gives you, for the customers who don't want to expose their application to the public internet, but they want to only do it through front door, that um, once again, for them, this is a good opportunity to use. Just keep in mind that both Azure Front Door Premium and Basic, they are currently in public preview. Once they go GA, then um, so that's the thing. Okay, sorry. For example, let's go here. Okay, so for some reason I'm having some issues with the presentation today. Okay, so this is kind of a quick comparison. By the way, any questions at the moment?
Nothing in the chat, Naveed.
Nothing in the chat. Okay, that's good. Okay, so this is kind of a quick comparison that we discuss. You have layer 7 and HTTP, HTTPS, path-based. The routing in the case of app gateway is path-based. With front door, I mean, routing is slightly different. You have actually very different. I shouldn't use the word slightly. You have latency-based routing, so you may have hosted sites in East US to West US to South Central, and then based on latency, the request will be routed to the appropriate application instance. Okay, same thing with the weighted, where you can say, okay, most of the requests should go to the my main application instance, which is hosted in Central, and the rest of the request, if that instance isn't available, or should go somewhere else. So, I mean, all of these type of things you can do with front door. In application gateway, it's only path based. And just a one huge big a thing that to keep in mind is application gateway is region locked. So you can create an application gateway in a region in a virtual network. It's not a global service. On the other hand, front door is a global service. Yes, when you create front door, it will ask you to create a resource group, and it will ask you to pick a region. This is just for the metadata, where the metadata is stored. Front door, as per se, it's a global service. It is cross region. So this is one of the big kind of indicator that you need to look at when you're picking your application. Should we use front door or should we use application gateway? And that's where this is. If your application needs to have multiple instances, It needs to be accessed across regions, and it needs to survive an outage in a particular region, then probably you need to look at front door. And if your application is specific to a region, and once again, we are talking about here public web apps. I know that you can have Azure Application Gateway running only for for um, for a private web application. But in this scenario, we are just talking about public web application. So this is the key here, you know. So that application has to be, we're talking about if you're hosting it for kind of cross region, then front door, single region is regional, then of course application. Get that simple. Both supports layer 7. Once again, if your workloads are not layer 7, then both of these are not a good solution. Actually, not solution at all. You need to look at something different. There is an Azure Global Load Balancer that may be able to help you. Once again, if your applications are virtual machines, if your applications have private endpoints and things like, or endpoints that are um, not public, then um, application gateway will be a solution for you. On the other hand, front door, now it is, if you have private endpoints for, let's say, your storage account, your internal load balancer, things like that, then it allows you an app service. It can kind of put those private endpoints behind it. So that's something that's a big criteria to understand that this is the service that you need to use. Once again, application gateway is zone redundant, but still it's not cross region. So that's something to pay close attention to. Any questions at the moment? Okay. Um, so there are certain scenarios where you will find that you may end up using both both of these applications, both of these services, and you will be using both of these services for the purposes of you know kind of getting the best of both worlds. And let's go to that scenario. Okay, so this is kind of a high level what services you should be using, and what are some of the key capabilities that you may be kind of thinking about. This is what we just talked about. This is captured on on this particular screen. This is what we are going to be doing. Okay, so finally, or kind of a key point, like why I have some customer who are using both of these services, which is um, using application gateway as well as front door. So why you want to do that? Because yes, I mean you may have some services that are living inside a VNet. I mean, as I said, you may have an AKS cluster and you may be using App Gateway as an ingress controller. Okay, but you want to make this application kind of a region redundant. So to make sure that if one region goes down, that application is still running. So you may have multi-region deployments. You have application gateway running in each region, serving as app gateway ingress controller for the AKS cluster, and then the um, you have the front door sitting and kind of doing the load balancing between two instances of this app gateway Azure Application Gateway. So that's where this thing will come in. Because just keep in mind some of the things that we take for granted with App Gateway, like connection draining, something like rule-based, route-based routing, and things like that. Those are not a part of front door. It is a kind of a service that is there to address some different scenario. So that's why you have to have a mix of both for for these type of scenario um, where you have kind of you have to use both the services. Okay, and just one thing I wanna kind of mention here that I think it will come as a kind of an interesting point, and somebody has brought it up in a separate discussion. Like with front door, once it has the support for private endpoints, do we need to use app gateway if our application has to be cross region? The answer is maybe. Maybe you don't need, because if you are not using any type of connection draining, if you don't need any, I mean, if you're private, the endpoints that you're hosting behind the scene, they're private, but they belong to an app service or a storage account or a internal load balancer, because these are the three private endpoints that are supported behind a front door, then you are okay. Then yeah, why not? Then it may be okay to just use application gateway because sorry, front door only, because you still get web application firewall and all those things and DDoS protection. But if you are hosting VM, you are hosting AKS clusters, and you are using App Gateway Ingress Controller, then maybe it's a good idea to use App Gateway Ingress Controller and then use Front Door in conjunction. So you may be, this is the better together story. But if you don't need those things, then probably, yeah, you may just go with just using front door as the application front door as the service to use. Okay, so with that, I just want to ask the audience. I mean, any questions, comments? What's your experience? I With this time, I want to hear from. I mean, if you have come across a scenario where you like pick one or the other, because as I said, this session is kind of a not about oh this is the best practice or not. It is more about what's the art of the possible, depending on what different use case or scenario that you are seeing, and then you are kind of using that particular service for that particular scenario.
Hey, Naveen, this is Len speaking. From my perspective, for the front door, when I had to choose, I went with the front door, was for the dual stack. When you want to move from the IPv6 and convert it to the IPv4, I'm not sure if application gateway can do it, but definitely front door does. So
That's
that's
a great point. Yes, actually, I missed that. Thank you for reminding me. This is one of the key thing. It can do IPv6 to IPv4 translation, where AppGate does not do that at the moment. I don't think so. I may be wrong, but that was one of the reasons. I know that uh, one customer picked it because of that reason, and they were like picked it in a way that they wanted to. They were definitely they had some IoT devices which were IPv6, and they wanted to make sure that this translation happens, and that's why they went with front door. So yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing it up. Any other? observation, comments?
This is more to do with the configuration. This is Mayur here, by the way. So let's say there is a customer which is having a disaster recovery scenario where they have a private endpoint in one region, and do they have to create another private endpoint in another region in considering the DR aspects, and then put the front door behind, and then so that it can load balance the load between the regions in case of any disaster recovery, or in case they want to prepare for that?
So normally, if you are doing the region-based disaster recovery, in that case, you will have two sets of each. So if you have an app service in, let's say, East and West, okay, you have East and app service in East app service in West. You will create a private endpoint and put it behind front door. Same thing for app service in West, you will create a private endpoint and put it in West as well and put it in behind front door. And by the way, those private endpoints you don't create in a VNet. You basically create inside front door, and you have to approve it and things like that. So you will have to do, yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to do to have like a highly available infrastructure. I hope that makes it clear. And just
Got
keep
it.
in mind, front door can only do public load balancing. So far, in Azure, there is no service that can do balancing inside of like across region, but over private. I mean, over private endpoints. You see what I'm saying? So let's say if I have two private endpoints and I want to load balance between them um, across region, I cannot do it. At the moment, there is no service that can do it over private endpoint. It has to be public endpoint.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for clarifying that. And out of curiosity, this one, because you also said about cross-region load balancer in the previous slide. So this is different from definitely from the front door / the Azure App Gateway, which is what I'm learning right now. And how different it is. I mean, in which scenario this one makes sense, the cross-region load balancer?
Oh, that's when you don't have layer 7. I mean, if
Okay.
you are just doing a load balancing, you have an application that is not talking HTTP. Layer 7 load balancer is your friend because it's sorry, cross region load balancer or global load balancer is your friend because that would be doing at a lower layer. I think it's a layer 3, and that's how it will do the load balancing. So if you have web application, then and by the way, in the documentation, I have a link which talks about what are the different load balancing options that you can use, and there's a checklist. I think you will find it really helpful. And global load balancer is when you have non-HTTP workloads that you want to load balance.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, feedback, observation? And sorry, folks, I had some hiccups and this session, so
Maybe nothing on the chat, but I do have a question on
please.
pricing. I saw in one of the slides that they are priced differently. If you have more insights on that, that might also help in taking the decision.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good point. So pricing, app gateway pricing is based on instance. You can scale it up, scale it down, things like that. So you pay for instance as well as bandwidth. Web application firewall will have a different charge. Okay. On the other hand, front door is a global service. There is no instance that you run. Yeah, you create an instance, but then you pay for the bandwidth and things like that. So, for example, if I go in here, we can just take a look. We have 2 minutes, so let's quickly take a look at Azure calculator. And if we pick up that should be in web. Come on. Or networking. So we have application gateway and we have front door. So let's go down here and both of these should be here. And as you can see here, there is gateway instances, data processed, and all those things. So you have instances as well as bandwidth. Okay, so that's both of these you have to take into account as you're looking at application gateway. On the other hand, front door, there is just the routing rule and the bandwidth. Of course, web application firewall, just keep in mind it will be applicable in both cases. Okay, so you will have to pay for web application firewall if you use application gateway, if you use it with application gateway or front door. So let's not worry about it. I mean, these are the things. I mean, you have um, routing rule and you have this data transfer. Routing rule is basically how many sites you're sending to and things like that. So more rules you have, of course, more money you have to pay, but main thing would be bandwidth. I hope that addresses your question.
That makes sense. Yeah, thanks, Naveed. It does.
And folks, thank you very much. And Ala, if you can stop recording.
Yeah, sure. No questions on the chat. We're good there. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.
Thank you very much. Thank